Welcome to Literary Deep Dives and Discussions with me, A.L. Liskey, the author of The Lattice Scheme and the Unseen Operative series. Today it will just be me, as it was last week, and we have a fun topic today that is coming from a passage in Chapter 9. So here we go. A possibility, yes, Wagner said, his voice carrying a hint of something that could have been concern, or perhaps calculation. The risk of injury is always present when one trespasses into another's psyche. Even if you do not intend to stay, the very act of entering leaves a mark. Azure felt a cold shiver run down her spine, the gravity of the situation becoming clearer. What sort of mark? In reply, he tapped his stick against his dark glasses. It is one thing to be in the darkness physically, and another to be in the darkness inwardly, he said softly, his voice carrying an air of quiet warning. Wisdom would have man cross himself before engaging that which would bring him both. Was this a hint that his dreamscape blindness came from neurotic tampering? How then, Azure spoke softly as well, her voice a delicate whisper in the stillness, did you escape it? Perhaps engaging more of his ego could reveal more of his motive and survival. Wagner paused, his fingers tapping lightly on the rim of his glasses, as though considering how much he should reveal. Escape is not always the right word, he said after a long moment. It is not about leaving this state, but learning how to navigate it. You cannot simply force your way out. You adapt, or you risk becoming trapped, unable to distinguish the dream from reality. Azure's brow furrowed. Then you found a way to adapt. He gave her a thin, almost knowing smile. By manner of speaking, yes. I have in time learned the liberty within the limitations. So, marks on the subconscious, that is what we're going to start with. The very first point he discussed. So, whether intended or not, we impact others. We leave marks on others. And when I say marks, when Wagner says marks, we're going to look at this as impressions we leave on others. Impressions that enter into our subconscious, that enter into our minds, things that are so minor that we don't really think much of them, but they're in there. So there's lots of things that leave marks on our subconscious. Let's kind of examine a few. There's articles and posts. You know, I'm a health nerd, so most of these come from what I see. I'm sure you can think of your own, but articles and posts like eat more fiber, Ozempic to lose weight, 8 traits of effective communication, 5 exercises that help tone the core more than sit-ups. And then, of course, the Bookstagram side. This book ruined me. This is the book of the year. A book trailer for Alchemized. Regretted seeing that, but I did. Read banned books versus don't read banned books. You know, convincing you to read my book with 5 sentences or less, or words or whatever. Those things, they stick in your brain. Just a little side note on the Alchemized thing. I'm not recommending that. I do not like that book. That is me. That is my soapbox. A lot of people say that book ruined them, and I'm not surprised given the topic manner that the subject within it. It's grotesque. Yeah, the marks they leave on us are not good, but we'll get into that later. That's the end of my soapbox on that. If you like it, good for you. Other things that leave marks on us: facial recognition, sound, smell, things that make us recollect things. So, you know, like you'll smell a candle and you're like, that reminded me of Christmas 50 years ago, or this baking cookies remind me of my childhood, reminds me of XYZ in the past, people that you see that you haven't seen in a while, those sorts of things. You recognize their face and you know who they are, you know, so-and-so looks like somebody familiar to me. Those marks on our minds. Then there's advertisements and billboards. So I'm sure you can finish these sentences just because you've seen them so much in advertisements. Like a good neighbor, Red Bull gives you fastest 5G home internet with, you know, we just know those things. They're the little America, blank a little. That's their whole billboard thing. So we know them, that there's a mark in us. We know it. It becomes common knowledge. Then there's books, of course. They influence the imagination, but also they leave marks on us that can form into ideas. You know, marks of what love, religion, science, academia, etc. All that is or should be. And then there's, you know, full of catchy words and phrases, raps, music, ways to cuss, curse, 6-7, YOLO, FOMO, sayings like common sense ain't common, you know, pick whatever is common saying to you. When people say that is catchy, it leaves a mark in you and it comes. And then, of course, there's subtle marks that really make a difference in our days, such as smiles, a wink, a smirk, a frown, somebody being stiff by you, somebody being relaxed by you. Body language leaves a lot of marks. So the point is that all of those things leave a mark on our subconscious, and we then let our brains interpret them. Sometimes they come to us at random times or pop out of our mouths later, or like I mentioned, they become what we consider common sense. But it all starts with some subconscious notion mark left in us. So most of those marks they're fairly harmless. Like, seeing that acquaintance, you might briefly wonder, what have they been up to for all these years? But there are some that do cause harm, subconscious harm. And that kind of it sort of all ties into last week's talk of ideas. Ideas are powerful, and marks, for lack of better terms, are the bittiest little ideas that pop into our minds and lay dormant somewhere between microseconds to years, depending on the frequency of exposure to similar marks and whatnot, or if brought into the subconscious recognition. So ideas can be subconscious or conscious. The point is, marks are precursors to ideas. Back to harmful subconscious marks, microtraumas, all of that, the body keeping score, huge fascinating science. There's a lot of controversy behind it as well, but we're just going to let that can of tuna sit to the side for now. So the subconscious emotional mental struggles, especially from trauma and abuse, can develop into mental emotional disorders as well as lead to physiological symptoms. Gut disorders, since I have one, are very linked. They're very correlated, not caused by abuse. Again, as in symptoms, manifest in that correlation. Correlation does not equal causation, as catchy as that might seem to be to claim. It's not. It's kind of like saying, science proves. Man, that is a catchy saying everybody says. Not everybody. Man, I'm an extremist right now. A lot of folks say science proves this, science proves that. That is their claim. And guess what? Science doesn't prove anything. A real scientist will never use the word science proves. It proofs, as in it tests to see if things correlate, cause, or cannot be countered. Science presents findings of what has not yet been proven false. And it changes if and when things are proven false. So science is always changing. Tangent over on science. The point is, some marks are harmless, others are not, right? And it affects our bodies. It can affect our bodies. So what Wagner's saying is that there's always a risk of injury when a mark is left on the subconscious. Yes, in the fiction of the book, it's their entry, but in reality, it's literally just the same thing, because the subconscious marks frequented either by exposure or by our bringing them into consciousness create ideas. And as we've previously discussed, ideas are powerful. So marks matter. Precursors matter. Just like people who are into health like me, they say probiotics matter, prebiotics matter. You can't make the bread without the ingredients. The ingredients matter. So marks matter. Some marks are in our control and a good portion aren't. Or rather, a good portion of the marks left on us are only in the control of others around us. Just like we can only control the marks that we try to leave on others around us, to a point. Being human and not seeing everything, we do things that leave marks on others that we're not even aware of. So like I said, a greater portion are not in our control per se. So all those mediums that I mentioned before, a lot of them are literally created to put impressions on us that will hopefully, with exposure frequently enough, or interest, develop into an idea. And if they aren't an idea yet, or they're not something that you're really into, maybe they'll be something that you eventually buy into, with frequent exposure. That's clever, huh? That's marketing. And it's clever until it becomes harmful, especially in this day of mass information that we have, with impressions coming everywhere that can leave us questioning everything that's real, everything that's good, everything that's bad, everything that's possible. Stereotypes, idealism, all of it comes or is perpetuated in this way. A high example is like America's standards of beauty. Oh, how we hate objectifying ourselves, especially us women. We hate being objects, and yet we buy into the same comparison and expect it, do we not? We do. Look at Hallmark, look at advertisements, anywhere you look, there is that perpetuation of beauty standards. Even the folks that are fighting against it, we perpetuate it just by bringing it up in a fight against it. Is this a problem? Is this perpetuation of things a problem? Yes. And I make that claim on this basis. And the statistical increases of emotional and mental disorders, mainly depression, continue to skyrocket in this country. Our nation has never been so depressed, so suicidal, so anxious, so insecure as it is today. And it continues. I could probably make a claim that in a year compared to today, it's going to go up as well. We claim we need better mental health care, but really my argument is that first, we really ought to establish standards for what we permit to perpetuate and play within our minds and our emotions in society. Big social movements today exist on perpetuating stereotypes, labels, politics, even, brainwashing, Well, newsflash, mental health clinics are not going to fix us from perpetuating in and on ourselves and each other the things that we keep putting out that are harming us. We cannot expect a clinic to be accountable for what we control or what we can try to control. By control, I mean how we respond to these marks, these ideas, both of them together that are left on us. If we actually care about ourselves and care about each other, we would take accountability to address the perpetuation and the use of perpetuated harmful impressions within our control, first individually and then collectively. So why should I be responsible for what media puts into my head? I can't control others. Maybe that's what you're thinking. And the answer is no, you can't. It's not to control. We're not trying to control every little person. We're not trying to control others. The point is to control what we permit to mark us subconsciously as much as possible, and then to collaborate as a society with enough care for each other's mental health and physical health, because again, that mental health impacts the physical health, to find a preventative, lasting solution, because that is in our power to try to find something that will at least harness some base to keep all this craziness about us from becoming crazier, and the depression around us from becoming worse. So it's not so much about taking away the freedom to have ideas. It's about educating what's proper so that we're not constantly depressed and weighed down by false ideas and things that continue to hurt us. And yeah, we can argue about that. What I say is wrong and what someone else might say is also wrong. And, what is the actual standard? That's why we've got to collaborate on them. This isn't one person deciding everything. It's us as humans collectively doing it. And we can do that. We can have that conversation, can we not? But that's off of my political soapbox for now. Another argument is I don't want to live in a bubble. Well, actually you do. Fun fact, everyone lives in a bubble. What that bubble is, 80% our choice of what we permit in, what we choose, 10% of what's around us by circumstance, and 10% about what others are bombarding us with or what we choose to allow in. We can let 10% of our bubble control our reality if we want to. Many do. But the reality is we all live in bubbles that we create for ourselves with what we like, with what we don't like, with our routines, with our interests, Everyone lives in a bubble. Everyone's bubble is just different. And for the sake of our personal health and sanity, it's worthwhile to live in a controlled bubble, especially from time to time. I mean, who doesn't benefit from a social media break? I mean, look into that science, would you? Look into the benefits of it. Why is that even a thing if we don't need to have a bubble away from all the insanity sometimes? The point is we're in crisis. And it's time to do something about it, first individually and then collectively. Now, I'm not looking to start a movement here at all. The Lattice Scheme and these podcasts, yeah, I'm looking at macro issues, but I'm more interested in the individual micro level. Because at the end of the day, that is the thing that matters most. That is the thing in our control. If we as individuals can empower ourselves to be healthy, happy, strong, that's what makes a difference on the macro issues. I can't single-handedly, and boy, I do not even want to try to single-handedly tackle any of the macro issues, but I do want to do my part for what I can do. And that's to help my mental health and sanity and to, share my ideas that might help others because my life affects theirs. And I feel accountable for what I put out. Yeah, I'm not trying to start a movement, but we have controls to help our sanity and what marks reach us. Algorithms. If you want good, look up good things. What you search comes back to you. That's just a basic principle for life. What you look for, it comes back to you. What you don't look for, you're not going to get. So, look for good things. Add good things into your life. Make yourself a good, happy bubble. My Facebook used to be a positive place because a happy bubble. I was able to make it a happy bubble. Now, of course, algorithms are changing, so it's more difficult to do that. We don't have as much control as we used to. Take that into account. Educate ourselves as we make our bubbles, and what we include in those 10% that come from the circumstance and from others around us. Ultimately, if you change the things you look at, the things you look at change. That's one of my favorite things to say. It's been on my Facebook profile for years, but it's true. If you change the things you look at, the things you look at change. Or if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. I'll let you sit with that for a while. Harmful marks, traumatic ones, having a mark or how long a mark lasts subconsciously. That's a topic without a full answer. Some marks that are traumatic last a lifetime. Some don't. It differs for everyone, even in similar situations. What we do know is that physiologically, emotionally, and mentally, these effects can be relieved or exasperated, is that the word? On rare occasion, they might be healed by the things we do or don't do. Like whether we address them with healthy techniques or methods, or whether we do unhealthy things or push them down. And like I said, it differs on every situation. Sometimes ignoring traumatic marks does help, and sometimes it really doesn't. There's not a one solution fits all, just like eating more fiber does not automatically cure constipation, like Google wants me to believe still, and many doctors. Some harmful marks, they trigger things like addiction, pornography particularly, or fetishes. They can recur in symptoms situationally based. We identify those as urges, and if you act on them, addiction can reflare. If you don't, eventually the urge or the festering subconscious mark dies out until the next situation or whatnot. But hopefully you have the power to develop techniques to deal with that properly. That is in our control, is how we deal with our marks. So even if we can't control all of the subconscious marks, we can control our responses to them, or the lack of response to them. And that goes back to the episode on accountability, as well as the one on ideas. That is not this episode, so I would refer to you to, listen to those episodes in consideration to this one. So now we're going to move on to the next part of what Wagner said. He said in time he learned the liberty within the limitations, because marks leave limitations. They can. Some of them can. Those mental and emotional ones especially. In my degree, in my bachelor's degree, we studied things like attachment theory, where how you are nurtured, or what parenting styles were used to influence you, to leave marks on you, comes back to how you interact with other human relationships throughout your life. These are like secure attachment, anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, and disorganized attachment. So just a little bit on both of those. I won't dive into these seriously deeply because that is not the topic of today, but I could probably talk attachment theory all day. Secure attachment, you feel good, you feel comfortable, confident, you have a healthy back and forth relationship. Anxious, there's different forms of anxious avoidant, anxious secure, anxious disorganized. There's subcategories to all of these, but anxious is usually you're like, oh, I'm going to lose you, so I need to cling to you. Avoidant, I don't want a relationship, just push you away. Disorganized is like a frenzy of yes, no, maybe so, nobody knows what's going on. Yeah. That's layman terms. It can be a huge struggle though, for how, if, when, and the duration of the relationships we have, intimate, family ones, friends ones, like acquaintances. The way we interact with others comes from the marks that have been left on us in large part. Similarly, the physiological limitations that arise from subconscious marks influence how, when, if, why, and the durations of our interactions with others. You might be like, what? But just a small example. I'm not sure if my physiological GI issues come from the abuse I had in the past, but because there is that correlation, I have to entertain that idea. And my GI issues limit when I can leave a house, when I can have a video conference. I have to deal with these things. And so it limits the duration of my interaction with others, where, when, and if I can interact with others. And that's just from my perspective, but I know others out there have the same things. I'm sure somebody listening has a physiological limitation from a mark left in their past. They can relate to that. It's devastating for many of us. It literally can be life-making or life-shaking, these marks left on us. And yet there's a liberty we can choose to discover that enables quality and fulfilling life in spite of our limitations. Wagner with time discovered it, and we can too. It starts with a recognition of our circumstance. See, in our heads, we naturally think life should look like X, Y, Z, that I cannot be truly living unless X, Y, Z happens. Why? Because the marks on me, many from society, some from others, some from myself, that tell me that is what life should look like for me. That is my expectation. My husband has mentioned before, college is like shoved down a lot of high schoolers' throats. You got to go to college. If you don't go to college, you're a failure. There's ecclesiastical things too that seem to be perpetuated that way as well. Those are marks left on us, whether they're healthy or not, comes down to a lot to how we deal with them or interpret them, those ideas in our heads that arise from them. But XYZ, that's the standard, and guess what? They don't apply. Throw them out. XYZ, unless it fits your current ability, your current circumstance or limitation, it isn't a valid expectation for you. And it will only harm you to constantly dwell on that ideal before or without recognizing what's real about your circumstance. Why? Because XYZ, that mark, that specific way of living, it denies the reality of where you're at right now. Am I saying it's impossible? No. But I am saying that very specific way, that idea that you're cleaving to, that you think it's how it should be, that is the one quality life, unless you meet those exact XYZ marks, you're a failure, doesn't apply. It's not real. Throw it out. It is not possible, and it is not healthy to hold on to that. You need to recognize honestly the reality of your limitation. And then, and here's the key part, be curious, get curious. What can you do within your limitation, in spite of your limitation? What is still in your power? So for example, my XYZ, I love travel. I love travel. I've always loved, going on trips with my mom, with my family, seeing the world. Like, I have such a travel bug now that even though I feel like I can't do it, I can't travel is what I tell myself now, because I hyperfixate on my standards of how I should travel. We move a lot because that's the only way I can get around, is being stationary and adapting to it after a long period of time. So when I focus on the way that I expect I should be able to travel like a normal person, buy a plane ticket, ride the plane, get to the place, blah, 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 flexibility and all that, get into a car, sit for long hours, you take stops here and there to go to the bathroom or whatever, you eat fast food, etc. None of that works for me because I have a very specific diet that my body can eat. My GI issues make it very difficult to sit for long periods of time. I do need access to a bathroom. Certain times literally matter, or all heck breaks loose in a whole ton of pain. So if I focus on my XYZ idea of travel, the outcome is that I can't travel. It's impossible. And I get depressed and I get lonely and I get upset because my GI issues, my limitation, that mark left on me prevents it in a way that I can visualize it in that moment. Here's that part too. If I recognize the reality is I have a gut thing and I'm curious about it and I'm honest about it, I recognize that I can't travel like XYZ expectation. But what I can do, what I have been able to do, because I've tried it, is take small trips around little places that I live. I can travel with my GI issues if I take those smaller trips, if I prep food before, if I plan for the worst case outcome with all the medications I need, all the help things I need, then even if, it's not fantastically smooth like I wish it would go, it's still possible. Throws out my XYZ completely. And suddenly I can find there is liberty within my limitation. It's a new criteria. It makes possible my ideal while being grounded in the real. Ideally, we wouldn't have days of depression or anxious breakdowns, panic attacks, phobias, any of that. But realistically, we do. And if we search for good help, ideas, and try new ways of living quality lives we deserve within our reality, we can discover a liberty that exists in our limitations that allows us that life. It's not that XYZ that we just threw out because that's not possible. It's better. This is ABC. This is current. This is new. This is fresh. This is life. And it's better because it is possible. It takes away that depression factor because it is possible. That alone, that's liberty. We're not giving up on our dreams. We're not giving up on our goals or our lives. We're just discovering a real way, a new way to do it. See, when harmful marks bring us down, we can be bitter or we can be better. That is something that my grandma-in-law said. And she's right. That is a catchy mark, and it's a good catchy mark to keep in me. We can be bitter or be better. It applies to all limitations, seen and unseen. I firmly believe that all weaknesses can become strengths. Actually, I know that because I've lived it again and again several times, as much as I like to forget that. I've lived that. The very things that perpetrated my eating disorder, to poor nutrition, exercise, all that, those are now my strengths in health. Rigidity became balanced self-control. I've seen it with public speaking as well. I used to have, it's a disorder called selective mutism. When I was in third grade, up to third grade, I was always an active kid in class. Past elementary, I got back there, but I don't know why I could not talk. I could not talk to the teacher. I could not talk to my classmates. It was like my mouth it would not talk. Everyone assumed I was shy. And there was parts of that, but really that wasn't it at all. I could not talk, but it's not an issue now. It's not. I can talk now. And that was hard to break, but maybe that came from the abuse too. I don't know. I really don't know. But the point is, there was something I could do about it, and it was overcomeable. My weakness became my strength. Public speaking, love it. Love it, love it. And talking as much as I can, absolutely. Trying to get me to shut up is a whole nother thing. Stage fright as well. I did have occasional stage fright and anxiety, but it's gone now. Like, if I feel flutters, I identify it as excitement. I am excited to talk. I am excited to do this thing. Even if I fell at it, I'm excited. We have control over that. So many things are possible, even with limitations. It takes time. Wagner acknowledges that. It takes time, experience, or experimentation, curiosity, and tossing out the tosh, XYZ. Got to toss out the tosh. I like that. That should be written on a t-shirt. In my book, The Lattice Scheme, there are a couple examples about how we handle limitations and when they come and how they affect us in different ways. And specifically, that goes to 3 Dreamwalkers. Now, anybody who is listening who has not read all the way through the book, this is a section that has a little bit of spoilers. I'm going to give a little bit of spoilers here, so you are more than welcome to end the podcast here. Save yourself from spoilers, I promise. Anything that's talked about past this point, you can come back to, and you will be perfectly fine. You're not, don't let the FOMO get you. You're not missing out. I mean, if you come back later, please come back later. But yeah, if you don't want spoilers, it's okay to clock out right now. The 3 Dreamwalkers that really fit this Mark thing is Holden Wagner, Alma Morales, and Ariane Desdemona. So Wagner, he is physically blind. I know we haven't seen him in the physical setting in the real world in the book, but I promise you, if he ever does show up, he will be blind. Very, very blind. He's blind in the dreamscape. He's blind in real life. And yet he has this incredible ability to sense things around him. He's got this profound wisdom. He's learned how to adapt and to work with his circumstance. And I mean, according to the things that Azure learns, he's on quite a mission of protecting people's subconscious. Well, the subconscious of the people in the United States. Then there's Alma Morales. Oh my goodness. She has been through the ringer. I mean, Wagner's been through the ringer too. We will learn more and more about his story, but Alma, we know for sure right off the bat, she has had PSTD. Having gone through the European dream trials, she's had PSTD. She is a dream walker, so staying out of the dreamscape is literally impossible for her now. Azure learns that later through Wagner. Once you've entered, you start this downhill trajectory, kind of like a terminal illness, that eventually you cannot stay out of it. And he says at that point, you better hope somebody's watching over your body, because it's pretty much like being comatose. Not fun, right? So Alma's got that. And then she's also got, with the neurochip, there's trauma from that alone, but she's also got missing memories that can't be reconciled. And, I don't know what sort of trial that's like for myself, but I've been reading a lot of studies about folks who have had brain injuries or surgeries that end up with neurotic damage. And it's horrifying trying to live with that and navigate things. Amnesia is one thing as well that's, similar to that how do you figure out your life when things aren't fitting together? And, if we talk about dementia and Alzheimer's as well, which are completely different in some ways and also very similar. But yeah, things with the memory. Oh my goodness. That is a limitation. That's a mass limitation. People make movies off of memory limitations. I wrote a book about it. But that is a limitation. And yet what is she doing about it? She's living the only way she can find right now that is useful, that gives her purpose. And Alma is powerful. We're going to see a lot from her throughout the series. She does a lot within her limitations, despite the pain and the difficulties, because she's learned the liberty that is allotted for her. Now, as far as whether she feels she has a quality life, that's up in the airs. Attitude is everything, but also perspective. What we get from Alma is that she's not at the same level of peace as Wagner. If we're talking about learning liberty within our limitations, these marks, Wagner is like the top of the spectrum, the way that we want to be. Alma is somewhere in the middle. And then we come to Ariane Desdemona, who doesn't appear to have marks, really. I mean, she does because she's human. She's also a dream walker. We know that. And she's also violently obsessed with finding Alma because she believes Alma has this ability that will extend her life. Because Ariane has used the dreamscape so much and neglected her body so much. She's lived on this high of this new ability without recognizing the reality of it being a limitation. Some of us do that. We think that's something great. Some limitations can seem great because of attention you get, for example. If I break my leg, I get attention. I don't know anyone who actually goes out of their way to break their leg for that. But the point is, there are some limitations, and I'd like you to kind of ponder on that. There are some limitations out there that people seek for their lives because it gives attention, because it gets something that they want or think they need, some sense of power, some sense of control. Eating disorders are very much like that. I know that. My eating disorder was my control of life. It was my ground of sanity. And so I kept it, even though it was hurting me. And that is what Ariane Desdemona is doing. She's living in this false sense of control, this mark left on her that is eating away at her, and her body suffers because of it. And eventually she dies. She did not learn the liberty within the limitation. I mean, you could argue she kind of did, because she found, just kind of like an eating disorder, that you find a sense of life, a sense of purpose, a sense of control. That's true. But is that really freedom? When you're so consumed with trying to maintain a status quo that you cannot relax, is that really freedom? Is that really liberty? Is that really living? Is that really quality life? No. No one in their right mind would say that that is a quality life. It's not thriving. You know, a thriving quality life exists first and foremost when we are at peace with ourselves and the world, and then when our well-being is at its optimal peak within our realistic circumstance. And hers was not. Those are my 3 examples from the book. And of course, she's on a journey throughout this series, this at least 4-book series. It might be 5 books. I don't know. I already have the 3rd one down in my head, so we'll see. But Azure is on a journey throughout this series. We're going to watch her learn her liberty within the limitations. There's going to be a lot of meltdowns, for lack of better terms. There's going to be difficulties. There's going to be growth. There's going to be overcoming trials, all sorts of things. It's exciting, but all of it applies to us because we all have limitations. And what we choose to do with them and in them is what makes the biggest difference. Our choices can perpetuate the onset of these marks turning into physiological symptoms, ultimately worsening, costing us dearly, kind of like Ariane, or they can extend to us a life of meaning, of quality, of purpose, or, you know, just us trooping on mediocre. There's so many possibilities out there. So my invitation, of course, I like to leave invitations. First, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. That would be my number 1 invitation. That matters more to me than you buying my book. Is let's have a conversation about these things that impact us, the marks that are left on us, how they manifest in us, and then the marks we leave on others. While we can't control the marks we leave on others, we can at least try to leave marks of people feeling that we're kind, that we're present, that we're caring, that we're supportive. My husband leaves marks of support on me all the time, and I often subconsciously, I carry them. I don't consciously realize them until after the fact, sometime later, when I'm giving it real thought. But those marks are there that he's left on me, as have so many in my life that have passed on. And I know that there's many people to come that will leave great marks on me, and there's people to come that will leave bad marks on me. And I can either let those fester and pull me down, as I have let many of them pull me down, or I can find that liberty within the limitation and grow past it. And in time, a lot of those weaknesses, those drawbacks, these physiological symptoms, they'll become manageable. They'll be freedom. They might even go away if a miracle happens. I believe in miracles, but the point is I can find liberty, and so can you. So I invite you to consider that this week. Leave your comments. Definitely subscribe if you haven't subscribed to the channel. That'd mean the world to me. You can also pick up a copy of The Lattice Scheme. There is a huge sale going on this entire December. So I have put the ebook down to the lowest possible price that I could put it down to, which is 99 cents. I don't make any money off of that, by the way. I just want you to be able to have it. I'd do it lower if I could, because it's not about the money for me. It's about you getting the experience of this fantastic book. The print book, the lowest I could take it down was $16.99. The hardcover as well. I am working on getting that below $20, so stay tuned for that. But that will be going on this entire month of December. Be sure to pick up a copy if you have not already. DM me if you somehow still cannot afford it. I will move mountains to help you get the book. Otherwise, stay tuned to next week, and we look forward to seeing you.